The warden's name was Cutler, and he had the manner of a man who had stopped being surprised by things a long time ago, and had arrived somewhere on the other side of surprise that had no name. He walked Sarah through the processing corridor and told her what she needed to know. Raymond Cull, 44 years old, 8 confirmed murders across 6 years, possibly more, scheduled for execution at 11 p.m. The previous evaluator, a Dr. Prentice, had submitted an incomplete assessment and was currently on medical leave of an unspecified nature. Sarah had 4 hours. If she found Cull competent, he died tonight. If she found him incompetent, he didn't. She had done 11 death row evaluations in her career. She was not sentimental about them. She went where the evidence went. She had found 8 men competent and 3 not. The 3 had surprised people who expected her to find them otherwise. She had stood behind all 11 and would stand behind them still. She asked about Prentice. Cutler said Prentice was fine. He said it the way people say things they don't want examined. She noted that his pace had slowed slightly when he said it, that his eyes had moved to the left wall of the corridor rather than staying on her face. She filed these things and kept walking. She had a talent for reading people. She had built a career on it. She was aware that a talent for reading people was also a vulnerability. The better you were at it, the more unsettled you became when someone didn't read. She had met perhaps 4 people in her career who genuinely hadn't. 2 had been severely dissociated. 1 had been the most controlled sociopath she'd encountered in 20 years of practice. She didn't know what Cutler wasn't saying about Prentice. She decided she didn't need to know it to do her job. She didn't examine it. The room they brought her to was small and painted the color of something that had once had a color. A table, 2 chairs, a window with wire in the glass that looked into the corridor. The kind of room that had heard everything and remembered none of it. She set up her recorder and her notepad and her pen. She had a system. The system had served her well for 15 years, and she trusted it the way she trusted her own hands. They brought Raymond Cull in at 7:09. He sat across from her and folded his hands on the table and looked at her. He was a compact man with a face that had the quality of furniture, present, functional, offering nothing beyond its purpose. His eyes were brown and clear and contained the specific attentiveness of someone who was listening carefully to something she couldn't hear. She tried to read him. It was automatic, the way breathing was automatic. She looked at the hands, still, no tremor, no tension in the knuckles. She looked at the set of the shoulders, neither braced nor collapsed. She looked at the eyes. The eyes were where she usually found the thread, the thing she could pull on to understand what was underneath. The eyes gave her nothing, not in the way a controlled person's eyes give nothing, the practiced blankness of someone working to conceal. These eyes gave nothing the way a window gives nothing when there's no light on the other side. She looked into them and looked and found no depth she could reach. She made a note of that and kept her face neutral and began. She introduced herself. She explained the process. She told him the assessment was not a performance and that she was interested only in the truth of his cognitive state. He let her finish. Then he said, in a voice that was not Raymond Cull's voice in any way she could have explained precisely, 3 things will end today because of choices you make in this room. I want you to know that before we begin so that you cannot say later you weren't told. Sarah looked at him. She wrote, grandiose ideation, possible delusional framework, note voice effect. She asked him to tell her his name. He smiled. It was a patient smile, the kind that had been waiting a long time to be used. I have had many names, he said. None of them belonged to me. She asked him what he preferred to be called. Nothing you can pronounce, he said, but we can dispense with names. Names are a human convenience. I find them limiting. She asked him who he was if not Raymond Cull. Something older than this building, he said. Something older than the language you're thinking in right now. Raymond was an adequate vessel. He had the right quality of emptiness. People with his particular history tend to. Small concessions over time, each one reasonable, until the accumulation becomes a door. He opened the door a long time before I walked through it. He has only himself to thank for the address. She wrote, dissociative identity presentation, claims non-human origin, assess for rehearsed performance. She asked him about the three things. He looked at her the way a teacher looks at a student who has asked a question slightly beneath their level. The man in this chair, he said, the woman you discharged on Thursday, and yourself, not today's self, the one you've been carrying since you were 16 years old. Sarah kept her pen moving. She had learned a long time ago that the pen kept her neutral. The pen was the distance between her and whatever was in the room with her. She asked him what he meant by the woman discharged on Thursday. Your patient, he said, Margaret. You cleared her for release because the indicators were ambiguous, and you gave ambiguity the benefit of the doubt. This is generally the correct approach. In this case it wasn't. She kept her face still. Margaret's release had been a complicated case. Ambiguous was accurate. She'd made the call she'd made and stood behind it. She asked him how he knew about her patients. He looked at her without expression. I know what I know, he said. You're going to ask me that 3 more times before you believe the answer doesn't change. She wrote, apparent knowledge of evaluator's professional history, possible prison information leak, possible Prentice connection, verify. She asked him about Raymond Cull's crimes. He shrugged with Raymond Cull's shoulders. Those are Raymond's. I arrived after the 3rd one. He was already in the habit by then. I simply encouraged the consistency. She asked him how he encouraged it. The same way I'm talking to you right now, he said, conversation. You'd be surprised how far a conversation can take a willing participant. Raymond was willing. He wanted to be told that what he already wanted to do was acceptable. That's almost always how it works. I don't create appetites. I find the ones that already exist and I make them feel reasonable. She asked him if he thought that made him responsible. For the murders? Legally, no. You'll find no precedent. He paused. Morally is a more interesting question, but you don't think about things in terms of morality. You think in terms of pathology. It's a way of being precise without having to be brave. She looked up from her notepad. He was watching her with those clear brown eyes that were not Raymond Cull's eyes in any functional sense she could name. She asked him what he meant by brave. He said, You know what you are, Dr. Nolan. You've known since you were 16. You built a career on helping people because it felt like counterweight. Not because you love people, you're tolerant of people, which is different and considerably less useful, but because you needed the scale to tip a certain direction when you looked at it. 20 years of assessments and referrals and careful correct decisions, and the scale still doesn't move the way you need it to, does it? She kept writing. Her handwriting was even and small and gave nothing away. She asked him what he thought he knew about her. Her name, he said, her career. The night of August 14th, 25 years ago, at a party in the backyard of a house on Callaway Street, a girl named Denise Marsh went into the water. Sarah Nolan stood at the edge of the pool. Sarah Nolan was a strong swimmer. Sarah Nolan stood there for 1.3 seconds before she started screaming for help. And in that 1.3 seconds she experienced something that she has described to herself ever since as shock. Sarah's pen stopped. It stopped, and she looked at the page and then she put the pen down and looked at her hands. She had told the story of that night many times, to the police, briefly, that same evening, to her parents, who had held her and told her there was nothing she could have done, to a therapist, twice, once at 19 and once at 31. Each time she had used the word shock. Each time the word had fit well enough that nobody had questioned it, including herself, almost all the way. The thing sitting across from her in Raymond Cull's body had just named the gap between almost and all the way, had named it precisely, without decoration, without cruelty, the way you state a fact. 1.3 seconds. She had never counted it. She had never assigned it a number. She had described it as a moment, as a freeze, as a response she couldn't control. 1.3 seconds was not uncontrollable. 1.3 seconds was a choice with a duration. He said, "It wasn't shock. You know it wasn't shock. You've always known it wasn't shock. You stood there, and you felt something, and then you felt ashamed of the something, and then you started screaming. And you have been running from that 1.3 seconds for 25 years while telling everyone, including yourself, that you were standing still." The room was very quiet. She picked the pen back up. Her handwriting when she resumed was the same as it had always been, even and small and giving nothing away. She was proud of that, and ashamed of being proud of it, and she kept writing. She asked him who told him that. "Nobody," he said simply. "I was there. Not in the way you were there, but present. I'm always present at those moments. They're the moments that interest me most." She asked him what moment interested him. "The moment of choice," he said, "not the choice itself. The moment before, when a person becomes aware that they have one. Most people don't recognize it as a choice. They call it instinct or shock or circumstance. That's the door. That's always the door." She wrote nothing for a long time. Then she wrote, "Subject demonstrates detailed knowledge of evaluator's personal history. Source unknown. Assess security protocol." She asked him what he wanted from this conversation. He looked at her with something that was almost amusement, but wasn't quite anything so warm as that. "Nothing from you," he said. "I've already gotten what I needed from you by your being here. You'll find Raymond competent. He is competent. His reasoning is sound. His understanding of consequence is clear. He made choices with full knowledge of their nature. You'll sign the paperwork and the man in this chair will be dead by midnight, and I will be elsewhere. That's all I needed, your signature. The rest of this is courtesy." She asked him what the rest of this was courtesy of. "Tradition," he said. "I like to tell people what's happening. It doesn't change anything, but it's courteous." She asked him about Margaret Solis again. He said, "She made a call 3 hours ago. I believe they're still looking for her. Check your phone when you leave this room." Her phone was in the locker outside the security door. She had put it there at 7 a.m. She asked him why he was telling her. "Because it won't help," he said, "and you deserve to know the things that won't help." The room held them both for a long moment. She asked him if he was afraid of dying. He said Raymond is. He's in there right now, quite frightened. He's been frightened for some time. He's not a bad man in the way people think of badness. He's a man who made a series of small decisions and arrived somewhere he didn't intend and found company waiting when he got there. Most of them are. The ones that interest me, anyway. She asked if she could speak to Raymond. He was quiet for a moment. Then the quality of the attention behind the eyes changed. The furniture quality of Raymond Cull's face shifted into something softer and younger and frightened. The voice that came out was Raymond Cull's voice. "Please," it said, "please. I don't know how to make it stop. I've been trying to make it stop for a long time. I don't know what I am anymore. I don't know which thoughts are mine." She leaned forward. She asked him, "Raymond, when did it start?" He said a name. "A small sin from childhood," he said. "A small thing." He said, "I don't understand how a small thing can become a door, but it did, and I walked through it, and when I looked back the door was gone." Then the eyes adjusted and Raymond Cull was gone again, and the other thing was looking at her with its patient, terrible calm. She sat back. She asked it, "What are you?" "Old," it said. "Tired in the way that things are tired that cannot stop. I don't have the nature you have language for. The names people have given me across the centuries are all inadequate. I don't have a shape. I have a function. I find the doors and I walk through them and I do what I do and then I find another door. That's all. There's no malice in it. Malice is a human quality. What I have is older and less interesting and considerably more persistent." She looked at Raymond Cul's hands folded on the table. She asked, "Why does it want to be executed?" "The host's body has been unwell," it said, "and I've been in this one long enough. The function is served. I'm ready to move on." She asked, "To where?" It smiled Raymond Cul's smile. "To whoever opens the next door," it said. "Someone always does. You'd be surprised how often the door is opened by someone who is absolutely certain they would never open it." She signed the assessment at 9:47 p.m. Raymond Cole demonstrated no cognitive impairment, no evidence of psychosis that met the legal standard, and clear comprehension of his crimes and their consequences. The assessment was thorough and defensible, and she stood behind every word of it. She retrieved her phone from the locker outside the security door. 14 missed calls from a number she recognized as the hospital where Margaret Solis had been admitted. She stood in the corridor and read the messages, and then she put the phone in her pocket and walked out of the building into the October night and stood in the parking lot for a long time. Margaret Solis had made a call at 7:10 that morning. She'd been found at 9:40. The window was narrow. The outcome was not something that a different decision on Thursday necessarily would have changed. She told herself that. She had the clinical language for it. She used it. She stood in the parking lot until her hands were cold. Then she got in her car. At 11 p.m. she sat in the witness room. She had not intended to stay. She told herself she needed to see it completed. She was not sure that was the true reason, and she didn't examine it closely. The room held 8 people: a chaplain, 2 attorneys, a victim's family member she didn't look at directly, 2 guards, a prison official whose role she didn't know, and herself. The execution proceeded as scheduled. She watched Raymond Cul's face. She had attended 2 executions before, as part of competency assessments, and had found them procedural in a way that was neither comforting nor disturbing, just the clinical end of a long institutional process. This was different. She was looking for something specific, and she knew it, and she watched with more focus than was professional or explainable. She was looking for the moment of departure, for some shift in the quality of what was behind the eyes, some evidence that what had been sitting in that chair across from her was no longer present, that it had moved, that it had gone somewhere, that she would be able to identify the precise second of its leaving and carry that information away from this room. There was nothing. Raymond Cul's face was Raymond Cul's face, and then it was a face with nobody in it, and the transition between those 2 states was very small. Smaller than she'd expected. She couldn't identify the second. She couldn't find the departure point. She thought about what it had said: "I don't have a shape. I have a function." She thought about things that don't depart because they were never fully present in the way she was looking for. She drove home in the dark. She thought about Denise Marsh. She thought about a pool in August and 1.3 seconds and the words she had never used for what happened in those seconds. She drove and the road was empty, and the words sat with her in the car the whole way home. She didn't say it aloud, but she stopped calling it something else. That was something. She wasn't sure what. She went back to the prison 2 days later to collect a document she'd left in the records office. She was walking to her car in the afternoon light when a guard held the door for her. Young man, late 20s, face she didn't recognize from her visits. He held the door and nodded, and she thanked him and walked through. She was 10 steps into the parking lot when something made her look back. The guard was still standing at the door, not holding it anymore, just standing, looking at her with clear brown eyes that she had seen before in a different face in a small painted room. She stopped walking. He smiled, patient and unhurried and without warmth, the smile of something that has been waiting so long that waiting itself has become comfortable. Then a second guard said something to him from inside, and he turned and went back through the door and was gone. Sarah stood in the parking lot. She stood there for a long time. Then she got in her car and sat with her hands on the wheel and thought about what it had said. Someone always opens the next door. You'd be surprised how often it's someone who is absolutely certain they never would. She thought about a career built on counterweight, 20 years of careful, correct decisions, the scale that never moved quite the way she needed it to. She thought about doors. She started the car and drove home and didn't look in the mirror.
If you enjoyed this video, please do not forget to like, comment, or share this video with your friends. Subscribe to our channel to hear more stories like this one.